Hi, so I'm Martha Pusey and I'm head of Sage House.
Hi, I'm Louisa. I'm a Wayfinder with dementia support.
Hello, my name's Jackie Pond. I'm a Wayfinder with dementia support.
And my name's Amy Parr, and I'm also a Wayfinder with dementia support.
So today we're going to be talking about guilt and grief in relation to supporting somebody with dementia. So this is a topic that we talk about quite a lot with some of our carers, but also it's quite relevant for some of our customers who are also living with dementia. So we're going to talk a little bit about the experiences of guilt and grief and the things that some of our customers that we talk to regularly have experienced. So grief, first of all, is a process that all of us go through when somebody passes away. But for some of our carers, we find that they go through that process before their loved one has even passed away. So the grief cycle that we go through starts with denial. So it could be perhaps denying that somebody's got dementia, denying that diagnosis. It then moves into anger, so feeling cross about the diagnosis that they've got. Then moving into bargaining, so the person might think, well, why couldn't it be somebody else? Why did it have to be me? And then into a bit of depression, and then finally moving into acceptance. And especially when we're working with some of our customers, we find that they go through that cycle particularly. So for somebody who is actually living with dementia, who has lost a loved one, perhaps say, I work with a gentleman who lost his wife, probably about 5-6 years ago, but he regularly doesn't remember that she's actually passed away, and he will ask us, have you seen my wife? Do you know where she is? He thinks when he comes to us that he's in a hotel, so sometimes we might say, oh, I haven't seen her today, but we'll ask at reception, we'll see which room she's in, we'll see if we can find her for you and pass on a message. So rather than actually giving him that really difficult message of, I'm really sorry your wife has died, we try and make it in a way that's a little bit more comforting for him, just saying that we haven't seen her, we don't know where she is today. Some carers can find that really difficult, having to explain that to the person. This gentleman in particular, there will be times when he will actually ask the question, has my wife died? Is she dead? Because he has got some remembering of that. And it is at those times that the staff will say to him, yes, I'm really sorry that your wife passed away. But it is around then validating that message of who his wife was. So asking him questions about her. What did she look like? What clothes did she like to wear? What were the things that you really liked about her? And this gentleman particularly, he loved talking about his wife. He was a head teacher, and he would always say that his wife was the most important person because she had to keep him, his diary, absolutely everything up to date. So he really loved to then be able to talk about her and validate who she was. There are some other experiences that some of our customers experience. And Jackie, I think you've supported some customers who have some difficulties as well.
Thanks, Martha. Yes, I do. I'm going to give you two examples of some customers I'm supporting. I have a gentleman and his wife. They are now in their 80s, and they met when they were actually 16. So they've been together an awfully long time. Unfortunately, the gentleman concerned has dementia, but this particular aspect of his day is usually after sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, when he will ask for his mum and dad. He gets to the situation where he wants to know where they are they coming to pick him up? Is he going to be going to them? And sometimes, physically gets his coat on, gets his shoes on, wants to leave the house because he's going to his mum and dad. The way that the family have managed this, because this isn't something that happens from time to time, it's a daily event now, and he gets quite distressed about it. So they've come up with a technique, really, which is to say, yes, you will be seeing your mum and dad tomorrow. It's all arranged. It's all booked, to get him nice and calm, because this can sometimes lead into almost an anxiety attack for this gentleman. And then nighttime, bedtime, any other routine is completely gone because he's constantly looking for them. So that's one way that it's dealt with. And in actual fact, he does calm down at that. The second example I have is of a couple where she also, she has a diagnosis of dementia, and again at night time, obviously when people are the most tired, is looking for her mum, and she will actually say when they're actually in bed and they've gone through their normal evening routine, and will suddenly wake up and say, where's mummy? She needs her mum, she needs her mum. Her husband, in actual fact, chooses to go down the road of talking through the fact that her mum has died, and to try and perhaps what he thinks is jogging her memory will be to talk about the funeral, the eulogy, what was said at the funeral, the order of service. This is quite a brutal approach, and in actual doesn't generally work that well. But I understand why the gentleman's doing it, because he made a promise to his wife that he would never lie to her. This is really more about how you can support someone and approach the situation when they are feeling that anxious. So, for example, if we take out, for this case, the person looking for their mum, is that really where the person's saying, I'm feeling unsafe, I need some security, I want to feel safe and warm, as you do very often with a parent. So it could be there's some communication going on there as well, where she's actually asking for something else, which is some reassurance.
We also find in wayfinding that we often support carers that are caring for their loved one with dementia who's still alive and actually going through a grief process with that. So I'm currently working with a husband and wife, and the wife is actually in hospital, and upon discharge she will be going into a nursing home. So for the husband, he feels their relationship has changed. She's moved out of their home that they shared, and she's now in hospital, and actually she won't be returning to their home. She will be going to a nursing home, and he feels his wife has left him because they're not going to have that same relationship. And for him, it's going through that process of grief that their relationship has almost come to an end because her dementia has progressed. And it's accepting for him that he can't care in the same way as he did before, and he feels guilty that he can't fulfill that caring role. So our role as Wayfinders is to support him through this and find different ways to still support and offer support for his wife, but be with the husband in terms of going through that process of grief, guilt and acceptance that actually his caring role has changed and the relationship may have changed for him and his wife.
I think one of the things that I find quite evident in male carers, particularly when they get in that cycle of denial when their loved one, their wife, has very first been diagnosed, is that need to be really responsible. And men particularly, they hold on to their vows. They would have said for better and for worse, and they'll have had a wonderful marriage and life together, and this is the worst. This is the bit that they feel that they've got to do their best to fix everything, and will do absolutely everything that they can. And that's where the kind of real bargaining kind of comes into it. If I can do this and if I can do that, they take on that real element of responsibility for doing absolutely everything. And that for some of the carers can make them extremely tired and almost impossible sometimes to do their caring role. And Louisa, I think you've got some examples of some of the carers that you're supporting.
Yes, Martha, I've got a couple that I support, and the husband sadly has been diagnosed with dementia. But prior to this, the whole family had to face him having cancer and basically already grieving that he might actually pass away. And then he survived that. And like she said to me, now 2 years later, he's got dementia and there's no cure for it. So she's really grieving. I also have a gentleman that feels extremely guilty that his wife is in a home because he feels he's broken his marriage vows. He was supposed to look after her and he just couldn't. And he really struggles to come to terms with that. And then I also have a couple that the lady's been diagnosed with dementia fairly recently, and I speak to the husband quite regularly, and he is just sad because she is slipping away in front of his eyes, and he can see. So they're all grieving in their own way. It's really hard. Yeah. Now, Jackie, you've got a couple of ladies, don't you?
I do, thank you, Louisa. I just want to particularly mention a scenario where it's a couple that been supporting here at Sage House, haven't used any of our services other than to come into our cafe when it was open. Her husband had a diagnosis of quite a rare form of dementia, and it's just been the two of them. There hasn't been any outside support at all. But during lockdown, the gentleman actually got quite ill, and it now means that there is some professional caring help going into the home each day as well. So for the first time ever since they married, this lady had an offer of going off to meet a friend for coffee, only for an hour. And that would be the first time she'd spent any time away from her husband. And while she needed that respite, she got in the car and cried all the way to go and have coffee with her friend because she felt so guilty in leaving her husband behind. And whilst I understood that, I think it was more of an indication that she was almost at the point of exhaustion herself, and accepting that she would need the break also created some guilt for her. And I also have another couple where, due to lockdown, and her husband has a diagnosis of dementia, and he was unfortunately, the progression was speeding up quite considerably. And she made the decision just before lockdown to place this gentleman in a care home. And on the day she left him there, she drove home and just sat in the car and cried and just said, "What have I done?" But equally acknowledges the fact that there was no way that she could actually care for her husband at home when the unknown was out anyway of how this was going to be with regards to COVID as well. And Amy, I think you have an interesting poem about one of our customers, Norman.
I do. So I've got a poem here about Norman, who unfortunately passed away last year. So it's an ode to Norman. One quiet and sleepy Thursday morn, into Sage House walked a man named Norm, asking us questions about a runcible spoon, talk of turkeys marrying pigs beneath the moon. A jovial and lively chap, he would never be without his cap. With many a grand tale to tell, Norm had a captivating and magic spell. A laugh so infectious, a gentleman and true, with jokes often bordering on risque or blue. At Sage House, Norman liked to hold court, with many a valuable lesson to be taught. When taking part in a bird survey one day, I shouted, "Hey Norm, does that look like a jay?" With a haunty laugh, he replied back to me, "I'm blind, you know, that means I can't see." Norm also wanted to show that you're never too old to be daring and to be bold. At age 95, making his first floral display, once completed, shouting hip hip hooray. Meal times again, the laughter would begin, the weekly lunchtime toast that Norman would sing. Here's to me and my wife's husband Norm, and please don't forget I like my cup of tea warm. Lunchtime debates about what to call afters, puddings or desserts was the topic to master. But hang on, what's that I see on my plate? Don't you remember it's sausages I hate? And what's this been put in front of me? Who dared to make me such a cold cup of tea? One day he arrived without his teeth, a problem that gave him a lot of grief. For the day it became a great source of fun about where those old gnashes had gone. Thank goodness next time Norm came in, the teeth again made up that wonderful grin. Another day school kids came to read, and Norman said, "Young man, just take heed. For Uncle Norm, he knows best. I've heard enough, just give it a rest." Although the day I will remember most of all had sounds of laughter filling the hall, for after Norm's simple request, 2 twin babies were laid on his chest. I always wanted to be a dad. It's the best present I've ever had. I can sing to them, bounce them on my knee. It really fills my heart with so much glee. But first there is one thing I need you to do. Please take them away, they both smell of poo. Norm's time at Sage House went too fast, but meeting you has been a blast. Having only known Normie for such a short time, our life's now empty of his riddles and rhyme. Repetitions of the verse we no longer hear, the one that started, oh dear, oh dear. Sage House seems quiet once more, no made-up songs filling the corridor. So with a brandy and a fag in hand, I ask you if all will please stand and join me with a celebrational cheer to our Norm, sadly no longer here, to Norman and his wife's husband.
We'd just like to leave you just with a few memories of some of the wonderful customers that we've had here at Sage House, and hope that you found this talk on guilt and grief really helpful.